Welcome to the Doom Ship. It's the terrible nickname I'm gonna start calling my YouTube videos unless people actively dislike it. Just came to me at the top of my head. It's probably pretty terrible. So I have here Sultai Tracker, which is a deck I've been writing about, talking about, thinking about quite a while. It's basically a black-green rock deck that has a slightly worse mana base to accommodate some very powerful cards, which are namely Snapcaster Mage and sideboard spells. Nissa and Creeping Tar Pit are honorable mentions. Creeping Tar Pit, I think, power level-wise, is maybe a little bit above Treetop Village, but they're both really strong. Nissa's great. She's kind of an extra threat slash filter card. She's been really good at scrying excessive lands to the bottom, which this deck running 24 lands in a singleton traverse, kind of being a 25 land deck. Sometimes you want to put those lands in the bottom. I'll get to a little bit more after the first match, but here we go. Won the die roll. Awesome. I have a mediocre hand. It curves well, so I'll keep it as long as I really don't like Assassin's Trophy being my only removal spell. It's just not a great turn to play. Against Burn, for example, this is a really bad hand. Against any graveyard deck, this is a really bad hand. But on the play against an unknown opponent, I think having a hand that has a Tarmogoyf turn 2 and a little bit of a threat and plenty of lands is a fine hand to keep. So that makes the hand a lot better. My opponent played a Polluted Delta. Could be Grixis Shadow. Could be a control deck. Could be the Mirror. Could be a blue-black control. So I'm not expecting a deck with Path Exile, so I'm just going to fetch a basic here. Still don't know what my opponent's on. Could be a grindy deck, could be a control deck, could even be a combo deck like Grizzlebrand. And I'd rather play Scavenging Ooze since it's a bigger threat at the moment. And if my opponent has a Fatal Push, I'd rather Scavenging Ooze eat it than Tarmogoyf. Blue. It's probably seeing an opt here. Spell Snare. Okay. So now Goyf is much, much bigger. Don't know what our opponent's on. Probably blue-white control with Spell Snare. Maybe a blue tempo deck. Sure. Haven't seen Remand in a while from a control deck. Makes me think they're more in the tempo end of the spectrum, but they haven't done anything with the tempo they gained, so their tempo could just be slow me down so they can drop a Jace, which I'm fine with having Trophy in my hand. I know I momentarily, a moment ago, complained that Trophy was the only removal spell in my hand, but now I'm kind of thankful for it. My play here is going to be Tireless Tracker into Fetch Land if my opponent allows it. Alternatively, I could play Tarmogoyf and try to double spell with an Assassin's Trophy, but my opponent's already had 2 answers in their hand. I know they have 6 cards left, but you gotta try to hit your spots when you can against control. If I can get 2 clues right now, that could be enough tempo to try to outlast them. Okay. So this is actually kind of neat. My opponent's allowing me to be able to double spell anyway. End of turn, I'll be cracking that clue or playing Assassin's Trophy. If my opponent plays weird, I might consider just snapping Snapcaster out, but I really don't want to do that if I don't have to. For example, if they -1 here, I could flash, yep. So what I could do is I could flash Snapcaster Mage in as a way of killing Jace. That way I don't have to waste the Assassin's Trophy. And I could put a body on the board, which is very, very good. Against blue-white control, I don't want to play all my threats at once. I mean, you could argue that I should play the Tarmogoyf there just to try to race them. But if I walked into a Supreme Verdict, granted I have 3 clues in play, but that could still be really punishing. Okay. Timely Reinforcements, Remand, and Jace the Mind Sculptor. This is rough. It's almost like we're supposed to lose this match. So my opponent will have a Terminus, which is pretty rough. Vendilion Click gets rid of my Assassin's Trophy. Detention Sphere gets rid of my clues. I think I'm more... I really want that Assassin's Trophy to be able to kill Teferi. So even though that does kind of blank the Fatal Pushes in my hand, I think it's the correct play. No blocks. That was perfect. So my opponent draws a land, they have the Terminus. If they don't, they have Teferi, and then plenty of blockers to protect them. If my opponent had some sort of protection spell, I wouldn't have wanted to go down between 2 cards so I could trophy before the untap trigger. But I don't really have to worry about that at the moment. This is the danger zone against blue-white control. They've stabilized. I can't kill them quickly. They have 3 1/1 blockers in play. And they now get to start casting their cards, which are much stronger than any of mine. Teferi and Terminus on a power level are arguably higher than that of Leon of the Veil. Okay. Doing this before combat. I know it gives my opponent an extra mana, so they could potentially have something like Cryptic, but I want to do that before combat just in case. If they countered it, now I know I have to attack Teferi. I would use push, push, and then attack with everything I had. With Terminus in hand, there's no way I'm playing my Goyf. Their Ghost Quarter locks down my Creeping Tar Pit. My best bet is just that hope my opponent just keeps drawing lands that aren't Celestial Colonnade. But there's Colonnade right there. The opponent should attack before playing Terminus. But they don't. Sure. Three fatal pushes. What am I going to do with that? They kept up Ghost Quarter, so the Creeping Tar Pit can't do much damage. And I do have Snapcaster Mage, Assassin's Trophy, if they do drop something else. I could have Snapcaster Mage Inquisition there, but I didn't see the value in that. I'd rather save the Snapcaster for a trophy. The cards that they're going to use that I need to kill are Colonnade, Chase, Teferi, and maybe a Detention Sphere. Okay. Could flash and snap just as an extra attacker, but I think my clock is sufficient right now. My plan right now is attack with Tarmogoyf, then drop Liliana post-combat. If they have a mana leak, I'm covered. If they have Remand, I'm not. What do they have? Probably a Logic Knot. Yep. Sure. Terminus is such a gross spell. I'm not F6ing, because in case my opponent decides to attack with Colonnade, I want to be able to push it. Do I want to snap? Do I want to bring snap in? Can knock my opponent down to 5. I think I do. I love the idea of snap trophy, but my opponent is hellbent, and we're both top decking. I want to close this game as fast as possible. Okay, and I have a fatal push for that. And I believe I'm representing lethal. I think I want to crack this now. Perfect. So if my opponent board wipes, I still have some damage. If their plan is to block with the Colonnade, I have the Fatal Push. And then I can snap Fatal Push in case they counter it. One thing about this list is I did add an extra basic to accommodate this new meta. And I believe I have lethal here. It's always great stealing game 1 against blue-white control. So my opponent will activate Colonnade, I'll Fatal Push it, and that is going to be all she wrote. Okay, game 1 is over. What we learned here is that if your opponent top decks nothing, you win the game. They can fog for as long as they want, they can double Terminus, but man, Tireless Tracker is a hell of a card in these matchups, huh? How many clues did he get me? 4 or 5 cards? He was kind of like a Sphinx's Revelation that also threatened to win the game. So, our opponent didn't draw, they did draw a Jace. Jace minus Teferi. Snapcaster Mage just being Ambush Viper is way better than anything black-green rock could have thrown out. Just having a 2-1 flash is actually what won us this game. So in this matchup, I want the other trophy. I like the Decay. The Detention Sphere is Kanta. The Vendilion Click. So I would like to keep that in. Disdainful Stroke is absolutely brought in. Countersquall is absolutely brought in. We could bring in Unmoored Ego to try to name something we can't really deal with. Could also bring in Collective Brutality. Cards that are just easily cut. I know Fatal Push just won us the game, but it's just not good enough here. Thoughtseize is wonderful. Scavenging Ooze isn't as great in a matchup where our opponent doesn't use the graveyard and doesn't allow us to put things into our graveyard. Tarmogoyf is wonderful. Even if our opponent's bringing Rest in Peace, I still want to keep Tarmogoyf in the deck because it's our fastest clock. Without it, we kind of slow down a bit. We needed that punch in with the 6 damage that Tarmogoyf gave game 1, otherwise we would not have been able to compete, especially since our opponent has life gain with timely reinforcements. All the Lilianas are great, and the Nissa. This is just their value department. Can actually throw in Snap. This is our absolute value here. This is our removal, counter package, and disruption. So I don't like Unmoored Ego. I like cutting some numbers of Scooze. I also like having a 2-drop if I can. Traverse is fine. I am expecting some level of Grave Hate, so it's not actually that great. But I think I'd rather have 1 Fatal Push, just as an extra way of dealing with Colonnade that's not trophy, and also a way of killing Vendilion Click or something else my opponent could run over that extra Brutality. I have plenty of discard spells and disruption, so that Brutality could often just be a dead card. One thing I like about Sultai, that I feel like it attacks the format in a neat way, I have discard, I have planeswalkers, I have removal, and I have counter magic. Black-green X historically attacks your hand and your board. I'm able to attack your hand, board, and the stack with this deck, which is something I think is absolutely wonderful in Black-green X. Something that's been missing. Sure, I can get my blue-white opponent into top deck mode just fine, as we saw last game, but now, post-board, being able to get them into top deck mode and then having an answer for their top deck is really, really key here. I've heard plenty of people argue that Liliana the Veil and Snapcaster Mage, or Liliana the Veil and Countersquall, don't work well together. And I get it. In theory, they don't. You know, Liliana the Veil wants you to be hellbent, and Counter Magic wants you to hold it up. But I think they do work well together because you choose when you activate Liliana the Veil. You choose how you pilot that matchup. You choose whether or not you are going to go hellbent, whether or not you want to pitch that discard Counter Magic if it's the last card in your hand, or whether or not you want to, you know what, activate Liliana the Veil's secret 4th mode, which is do nothing, and pass the turn holding up Counter Magic. You choose. I think that is a really underestimated aspect of Liliana the Veil and Counter Magic. Plus, if you have a Liliana the Veil and you have a counter spell in your hand, you're probably winning. You're probably doing well enough where it doesn't matter which mode you choose. There have been some opponents who have, or not opponents, or proponents, I guess, or people who haven't really been liking Liliana the Veil in the meta. I kind of get it. She's terrible against a lot of aggro decks. I even built a Noble Hierarch Sultai deck, which I absolutely love. Someone dubbed it the most expensive deck in Modern. That deck's goal was to get Liliana the Veil out turn 2, so that she is good against aggro, because a turn 2 Liliana the Veil on the play does kill a Nowhere Elf, and can kind of throw your opponent off balance from there. I think Liliana the Veil is still really good in the format. Sure, the decks that she's best against are still really good against her. Blue-white just keeps getting better and better cards to beat Liliana the Veil. Teferi, Kentucker, Detention Sphere attacks her. They've been running more and more. I've been seeing Vendilion clicks. I think it's just to beat the mirror. But it also is really good against Liliana the Veil. So even the deck she's best against, in theory, one of those would be blue-white control. She's still not going to win you the game. What she can do is she can put you in a situation where you're better off to win the game. But doesn't mean she necessarily is going to win you the game. I'm not sure what my opponent's doing here. Okay, they disconnected. Ugh. I was going to say they're playing a slow deck. And they lost game 1. They only have 14 minutes of clock left. Unmoored Ego is a card I actually have not cast yet. I've run a couple leagues with this deck. One of them I recorded, but unfortunately the Kalitas bug was still in effect, and it was miserable. I was beating Abzan. I didn't know about the Kalitas bug, and the game reset. So I 4-1 that league, but I was very, very unhappy about it. But Unmoored Ego I have not cast yet. I think it'll be wonderful when I finally get a chance to cast it. Great against Valakut, Tron, Storm, Ad Nauseam. It's not dead against really anything. It's not great against certain decks, but if there's a card that just is absolutely going to beat you, you can take it out. I think Unmoored Ego is going to be better in the Noble Hierarch version, which is inherently better against a lot of those unfair decks anyway. Turn 2 Unmoored Ego against Valakut, Tron, Storm, any of those decks, it will be absolutely phenomenal and could be a blowout. Turn 3, not as great, but I don't think turn 3 is too slow when you have a turn 1 discard, and potentially in the post sideboard you could even have a turn 2 Countersquall. The Kitchen Finks in the sideboard is the 15th card in the sideboard. I've been bouncing around what I want there. Extra removal, an Abrupt Decay, another Collective Brutality. I thought about a wide variety of different spells. I was looking for something that I could also bring in. I wanted a grindy card because I want a certain number of grindy cards in the deck. I hate not having a certain number of grindy cards if I'm going to be facing the mirror. This is kind of how I was looking at my sideboard before. So I have all the counter magic for unfair things. I have a board wipe, I have a Collective Brutality, I have 4 pieces of graveyard hate, which I think is really important in this meta especially. I think I prefer 3 surgical, 1 spellbomb, and a Snapcaster deck. But spellbomb, one advantage of it is it works better with cards like Liliana the Veil when you want to get Hellbent. And it works really well with Nissa when you know what's on top and you want to draw it. The Kitchen Finks, though, is just a concession to Burn beating me up. And I was trying a bunch of different things. It probably should be that 3rd Collective Brutality in the 75. But I wanted something that I could bring in a grindier matchup, because if I sided out a few discard spells, I wanted to bring in cards, and I could easily bring in 3. I want to at least bring in 3. I'm not as upset about keeping in discard spells in a Snapcaster deck. I actually kind of like it. Turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Goyf. Let's keep it. Welcome back, opponent. Let's Lava Axe our face. So I have the Abrupt Decay for the search, so I'll take the Timely. Opponent played Island as Kanta. Liliana's a wonderful, wonderful draw. Do I want to play Abrupt Decay Liliana, knowing their shields are down, or do I want to play a Tarmogoyf and then play Liliana? Their hand is pretty bad. So far as I know, it's just land. So I really don't want them to draw into an answer. But I really also want to get Tarmogoyf into the field. I think the correct answer is play my threat and then go from there. I know my opponent gets a free scry here. And they're using it? Okay. But if I can have Tarmogoyf in play, Abrupt Decay the search next turn, Tarmogoyf can be much, much bigger. Or they can draw into a removal spell. Oh no. I clicked the wrong land there. Well, that was terrible. Hopefully that misclick doesn't cost me the game. I'll have to go back and look at that. I thought I was grabbing an Overgrown Tomb. Opponent plays an island. I think I just want to push Lily here. If they have the counterspell, they have it. Brings me closer to Traverse. Sure. It's another thing I chose incorrectly too. Maybe I should have taken the Azcanta. I'd taken these Kanta, my opponent would have had worse draws. Tarmogoyf's big. I can also play Tarmogoyf and Abrupt Decay next turn. I think that's what I want. Snapcaster is also really good. I think I actually prefer the Snapcaster. Next turn I'll do Abrupt Decay and Inquisition. Or maybe Snap if they flip it. I can Snap Trophy. A little behind here. I'm trying to value my opponent out. I want to be able to snap Traverse even, which would be pretty nice. Snap Traverse, grab another snap, and then I can snap Trophy. It's a pretty good value train. Especially in a situation where I just have to outlast my opponent. I won game one. Okay. Chosen mode. Yep. Can't cast any spells this turn. If I do, our opponent will just Cryptic Command it. And I really don't want them to get that any value there. Opponent's going to cast Cryptic anyway, just to draw a card. Maybe bounce one of my lands, draw a card. Or they should have, in my opinion. This is Cryptic Bait. I'm in a really, really bad spot here. Game 2, I think my chances of winning are 10 to 15%. This Ganta is a hell of a card advantage. My opponent has a ton of mana. They now have a protection spell which protects their colonnade from my removal spell. Sure. Okay. Might flash in Snap here, just to get a beater in before they untap with the Logic Knot. But I don't think that's enough value. I think I need to just work my way through the removal, slow them down a bit. They still have yet to present a way to kill me. Okay, so they still have Logic Knot. So they have a way of stopping my Fatal Push from killing their Colonnade. Sure. Opponent's playing really slow for someone who needs to win 2 more games in 5 minutes. I don't see any way I can win this, but I also don't see how my opponent can win 2 matches in 5 minutes. Especially if they're not attacking with Colonnade. I mean, Teferi's ultimate effectively wins the game, but it doesn't actually end the game. Yep, okay, finally attacking with Colonnade. This will get countered. And then I will go to 11. What? They had the Logic Knot. Okay. No, this one get countered. Yep. Big difference between MTGO friendly and MTGO competitive matches is the clock matters more. Sure. At this pace, my opponent will have 2 minutes left to clock by the time they finally put me at 0 life. I'm still 5 hits away. Sorry, I counted wrong. 4 hits away. Now I am 3 hits away. Probably should have kept it in hand just to make my opponent play around it, but this is one situation where I actually prefer online Magic to paper Magic. Granted, my opponent did disconnect there and lost, what, 5 minutes? But I mean, I've been pretty slow with my clicks just because I can afford to be. I've been diligent about being ahead on clock the whole game. It's something I try to do, especially in a control matchup. But in paper Magic, I've played plenty of slow opponents who push us into time or turns, and there's just no reason for it. Why should I get a tie or, a little bit of stress and lack of a bathroom break between rounds simply because my opponent is still dicking around with 2 planeswalkers in play when they have lethal on the board? There's no reason for them to be even using their planeswalkers at this point. They have 9 cards in hand. The only thing I could see is maybe Fate Sealing with Jace, but even then, that doesn't matter. And because my opponent's a reactive deck, because they're a reactive deck, they still kind of have to, they can't just F6 through everything like I am right now. Speaking of, did I even draw a single sideboard card this match? No. 24 cards deep, haven't seen a sideboard card yet. So, minute 46. I said we're right around 2 minutes. Knowing I just have to survive 2 minutes of clock, it's an awful way to win a game, but my opponent is playing slow. I'll bring in another Collective Brutality. At that rate, my opponent was almost been faster than they were playing if they just kept Fate Sealing Jace and then ulted Jace. But and they had that game in hand at what, I think 9 minutes of clock, and they took 7 more minutes to close it out. I just can't justify. That is a slow spot to be in. Terrible hand. Much better. I'd like a creature. Oh, some spice there. Archangel Avacyn. That way they have a flash creature instead of just running like a Baneslayer. I like Baneslayer more in these type of matchups, but my opponent kept a 1-land hand. Oh, they have Lyra also. Take the click. I didn't play a land. I don't think it even matters. Yeah. one land hand, blue-eye control. There's no way they could... I mean, I was going to win this game regardless. Drop a land, next turn I drop a Nissa, next turn after that I have Disdainful Stroke up while I'm plussing Nissa to an answer. My opponent can't path Nissa. Just an absolutely great place to be in. Unfortunately, this match was won by the clock. I kind of wish Game 3 was able to be seen or shown, but I will absolutely take the win here because my opponent did play slow. You can just look at the time left. I have 9 minutes on them. I think they only had like a 5-minute... No, they couldn't even have a 5-minute disconnect because at 5 minutes they get booted. So, alright, well, that was the match. Game 1 against Blue-White Control. It's one of the decks that Sultai is better than regular black-green decks at beating because of Disdainful Stroke and the other counter magic. And also, I think a little bit because of Nissa Steward the Elements. She helps you draw into the right half of the deck. Snapcaster Mage rebuying discard is also great in the matchup, as is Snapcaster Mage just being a flash creature, which your opponent's not expecting, as we saw in Game 1. So, Sultai Tracker, 1-0. See you in the next one.